There is a man who wakes up without urgency. He does not reach for his phone to check markets or messages from superiors. He moves slowly, deliberately, as if the world's noise has already been filtered out. At work, he performs well enough, but he is not an angel for promotion. He watches others compete for recognition, staying late, polishing presentations, signaling importance. He leaves on time. He declines the subtle invitations to join the race. To most people, this looks like a lack of hunger. Maybe even weakness. But inside, something else is happening. His refusal is not born from laziness. It is a calculation. He has studied the hierarchy and found it unimpressive. He has measured the rewards and noticed the cost. The larger house, the newer car, the louder status, none of it feels worth the trade of autonomy. So he withdraws, not dramatically, not with protest signs or angry speeches, but quietly. He stops volunteering for extra burdens. He reduces his needs. He lowers his exposure. Henry David Thoreau once did something similar. He stepped away from the machinery of ordinary ambition and built a small cabin near Walden Pond. It was not an escape from effort. It was a rejection of unnecessary effort. He wanted to see what remained when the chase was removed. That experiment was not romantic isolation, it was resistance to a culture that measured men by accumulation. The man who refuses wealth today may appear passive. Yet systems depend on participation. When a capable man opts out, even partially, he becomes harder to predict, harder to motivate, harder to steer. Ignoring wealth might seem neutral. But what if it quietly shifts the balance of power? When Thoreau walked into the woods near Walden Pond, he was not running from society in panic. He was testing it. He wanted to know how much of life was truly necessary and how much had been quietly imposed. The cabin he built was small. The expenses were minimal. He grew food, kept careful records, and calculated exactly how much labor was required to sustain himself. What he discovered unsettled him. It did not take much. He realized that most men were not poor because survival was expensive. They were poor because their desires were expensive. They worked long hours not for bread, but for symbols. For comfort layered upon comfort. For approval disguised as success. Thoreau reduced his needs until he could see clearly. Every hour he did not have to sell felt like recovered territory. Time became his measure of wealth. This was not idleness. He wrote, observed, studied nature, and thought deeply. But he chose his effort. That was the difference. He was not rejecting work, he was rejecting compulsion. Economic independence, in his view, meant freedom from unnecessary obligation. The fewer his needs, the less anyone could control him. For men who value autonomy over applause, this idea lands quietly but heavily. Wealth is not the car in the driveway. It is the ability to refuse what insults your judgment. It is the margin that protects your mind. Yet beneath this calm philosophy lies tension. If many capable men decided they needed very little, institutions built on ambition would feel the absence. Withdrawal may look peaceful, but it quietly changes the rules of the game. Modern society runs on participation. It assumes that capable men will wake up, apply their skills, compete for position, and expand the machine. Ambition fuels companies. Consumption sustains markets. Promotion ladders give structure to hierarchy. The entire system rests on an unspoken agreement: you will strive, and in return you will be rewarded. Even frustration is useful, as long as it keeps you inside the arena. But what happens when a thoughtful man steps back? Not in anger. Not in protest. He simply reduces his needs, declines advancement, stops chasing status. He performs his role without feeding the spectacle. At first, nothing dramatic changes. The meetings continue. The reports are filed. The quarterly targets are announced. On the surface, the structure appears stable. Yet institutions do not weaken from open rebellion alone. They weaken when competence withdraws. When the men who think carefully refuse to compete for leadership, the vacuum does not remain empty. It fills. Often with those more eager than capable. The tone grows louder, the messaging more aggressive, the performance more theatrical. Substance thins out quietly. This is the tension few acknowledge. A disengaged man may believe he is simply opting out of excess. But his absence reshapes the field. Systems depend less on obedience than on participation. When intelligent men withhold ambition, they are not just protecting their peace. They are redistributing influence without announcing it. So the question lingers beneath the calm surface: if ignoring wealth reduces your exposure, does it also reduce your leverage? Or does it quietly deprive the system of something it cannot easily replace? When most people hear the word wealth, they picture display. Expensive cars. Polished watches. Large houses placed where everyone can see them. The image is loud by design. It signals victory in a game that never fully explains its rules. For a man already skeptical of status culture, rejecting this version of wealth feels natural. It feels clean, honest, even intelligent. But that image is a distraction. Real wealth is quieter. It is not what you show, it is what you can refuse. It is the meeting you can decline without fear. The job you can leave without panic. The opinion you can voice without calculating the cost. Wealth, in its most practical form, is insulation from coercion. It buys margin. And margin protects judgment. Thoreau understood this distinction. He did not reject leverage, he rejected excess. He reduced his needs so that he required very little income. That reduction gave him power. The less he depended on the system, the less the system could shape him. His simplicity was strategic. It created distance between his conscience and external pressure. For men who value competence over spectacle, this reframing matters. If wealth is only vanity, it deserves dismissal. But if wealth is optionality, ignoring it entirely may have consequences. Moral clarity without resources can leave a man principled but cornered. Calm, yet constrained. The tension begins here. You can despise luxury and still recognize leverage. You can reject noise and still build insulation. The question is not whether to worship wealth. It is whether you can afford to misunderstand it. There is a particular calm that settles over a man when he stops trying to win. Not because he failed, but because he no longer finds the prize convincing. He still works. He still produces. But the restless comparison fades. He does not track titles with envy or measure himself against louder peers. The hierarchy continues around him, yet it feels distant, almost theatrical. From the outside, this calm looks harmless. He is not disruptive. He is not outspoken. He rarely argues. In meetings, he speaks only when necessary. He does not advertise his achievements or chase visibility. To ambitious colleagues, he appears unthreatening, someone who lacks the hunger required to climb. But the source of his calm is not weakness. It is detachment. And detachment changes a man's incentives. When approval loses value, so does manipulation. Praise no longer steers him. Subtle pressure carries less weight. He evaluates decisions quietly, according to his own standard, not the room's reaction. That independence is difficult to measure, which makes it difficult to manage. Institutions rely on motivation. Promotion, prestige, financial reward, these are levers. They move men who desire them. But what moves the man who has reduced his desires? What compels someone who is no longer chasing the visible markers of success? This is where the calm becomes dangerous. Not loud, not aggressive, simply ungovernable. A disengaged man may comply outwardly, yet internally he remains sovereign. And systems are far less comfortable with sovereignty than they admit. Every hierarchy eventually fills its empty spaces. Leadership roles do not disappear when thoughtful men decline them. They simply pass to whoever is willing to take them. And willingness is not the same as competence. When capable men withdraw from wealth building and authority, the system does not pause in reflection. It accelerates in another direction. You can see it in offices where the most measured voices stay quiet while the most confident rise quickly. The loud become visible. The visible become promoted. Over time, tone replaces substance. Meetings grow longer, language becomes inflated, and real problems remain untouched. It is not always corruption. Often it is just absence. The absence of steady, capable men who chose not to compete. Thoreau never encouraged mediocrity. He valued skill, clarity, and discipline. His withdrawal was about control over his labor, not abandonment of responsibility. But when independence turns into complete disengagement, something unintended can happen. Institutions begin to tilt toward those who crave power more than they understand it. For men who feel disillusioned with performative leadership, this creates a quiet conflict. Stepping away protects your integrity. Yet your absence leaves space. And space rarely stays empty. Someone will occupy it, shape decisions, influence outcomes. The question becomes difficult to ignore. If intelligent men abandon wealth and influence entirely, who shapes the culture that remains? And what happens when the least reflective inherit the loudest platforms? Withdrawal is usually described as retreat. A step backward. A quiet admission that the game is too difficult or too corrupt to win. But that assumption only holds if participation is the only source of power. What if participation is also a form of consent? What if stepping back is not surrender, but a decision to stop reinforcing structures you no longer respect? Thoreau understood this tension. When he refused to pay certain taxes that supported policies he believed were unjust, he did not stage a spectacle. He accepted the consequences calmly. A night in jail did not weaken him, it clarified his position. His resistance was not loud enough to start a riot, yet it was firm enough to expose a boundary. He chose where his energy would go, and where it would not. Economic participation works the same way. Every hour worked beyond necessity, every dollar spent to signal status, every ambition fueled purely by comparison feeds a larger system. Most men never question this exchange. They assume that striving is neutral, that earning and spending are simply facts of life. But when a capable man reduces his needs and limits his ambition, he quietly alters the flow. He stops chasing incentives designed to steer him. He declines roles that demand loyalty over judgment. He spends carefully, invests deliberately, and withholds enthusiasm from institutions he distrusts. On the surface, nothing dramatic happens. Yet something shifts. The system loses a measure of predictable compliance. Silence becomes a kind of pressure. Not explosive, but steady. The man who withdraws selectively cannot be easily motivated by applause or fear of missing out. His independence forces the environment to adjust around him. Seen this way, disengagement is not passivity. It is a redistribution of power back to the individual. And once reclaimed, that power changes how a man stands, even when he appears to be standing alone. Ambition often begins as a fire stoked by comparison. You see another man climb a ladder, acquire possessions, receive recognition, and the instinct is to match or surpass him. Every promotion, every accolade becomes a measurement not of skill, but of standing relative to others. The drive feels necessary, urgent, and unavoidable. It shapes decisions, colors perception, and occupies mental space. The man who steps away experiences a quiet shift. That fire no longer dictates choices. Comparison fades, not abruptly, but gradually, replaced by self-assessment. He measures his actions against his own standards, not the applause of a room or the approval of a hierarchy. Each decision becomes intentional, each effort purposeful, each day designed around selective priorities. He invests in skills that matter to him. He reads deeply, observing patterns that others miss. He reflects on human behavior, society's absurdities, and his own tendencies. Time is no longer consumed by endless chasing, it is structured to enhance understanding and capability. He participates in life, but selectively, choosing the arenas that align with his principles. Observation replaces reaction. He notices the energy wasted by those around him in performance and spectacle. He recognizes the subtle influence of environments designed to provoke stress, competition, or envy. And instead of responding impulsively, he chooses calm detachment, answering only when necessary, contributing only where meaningful. This transformation is not immediate nor dramatic. It is subtle, layered, and meditative. Yet it carries dignity. There is a quiet authority and restraint, a kind of strength that does not demand recognition. And yet, even as autonomy grows, the man senses a tension. Freedom without influence can isolate. The world continues to move, and while he observes and understands, his silence carries weight and sometimes solitude. Stepping back from the race of ambition brings clarity, but it carries a hidden cost. When a man disengages too completely, he risks losing not only contact with systems he distrusts, but the ability to influence them at all. Moral purity becomes a shield, but one that may also insulate him from the world he hopes to shape. The quiet confidence of autonomy can easily drift into isolation, leaving the man principled but powerless. Thoreau understood this tension. He lived deliberately, yes, but he did not vanish entirely from society. He observed, wrote, corresponded, and participated selectively. His withdrawal was never absolute. It was calculated, intentional, a means of testing society without surrendering all connection. The distance he maintained allowed him to retain perspective while keeping a subtle influence through his writing and example. For the man who rejects wealth and the pursuit of status, the question becomes practical as well as philosophical. Can detachment protect values if it also reduces leverage? Choosing silence over engagement may preserve integrity, but it can also limit impact. Decisions made in isolation may remain theoretical. The world moves, reshaped by those who are present, even if less competent. The risk is not failure nor corruption. It is absence. Absence from the arenas where choices are made, policies are shaped, and culture is influenced. By stepping away entirely, the disengaged man may find his principles intact, yet the outcomes of society diverge from them. The tension is subtle but profound. Autonomy without influence offers moral clarity, but also potential irrelevance. This section does not condemn withdrawal, it complicates it. It asks the viewer to reflect on the balance between independence and impact. To consider how much distance is safe, and how much may diminish the very values one seeks to protect. In this quiet contemplation, the mind begins to weigh the consequences of total disengagement, sensing that restraint, while dignified, carries its own responsibility. True independence does not require rejecting wealth entirely. It requires engaging on your own terms. A man can earn strategically, investing time and effort where it yields control rather than just applause. He can consume minimally, acquiring only what supports autonomy rather than status. In doing so, money becomes a tool, not a measure of self-worth. It funds options, not ego. Thoreau's philosophy offers guidance here not as an instruction to escape, but as a lens for evaluation. Every opportunity is filtered. Does this enhance freedom or diminish it? Every choice becomes deliberate. Work, spending, and ambition are exercised consciously rather than reflexively. By participating selectively, a man maintains sovereignty while gaining leverage, creating a balance between principle and practicality. True influence rarely announces itself with noise or spectacle. The man who combines autonomy with resources gains a quiet authority that cannot be easily challenged. His decisions are measured, his presence felt without drama. Ambition, in this sense, is no longer a race for visibility, but a careful calibration of depth and positioning. He invests in skills, relationships, and assets that compound over time, building leverage silently. Wealth, when used deliberately, strengthens independence rather than corrupts it. It allows him to act without compromise, to protect values, and to engage selectively. Loud success may attract attention, but quiet influence secures control. Position matters more than applause, and subtle authority often outlasts the transient thrill of recognition. In this framework, ambition becomes mastery of circumstance, not performance for an audience. The man who cannot be bought moves through the world quietly, yet decisively. He understands wealth not as a badge, but as leverage. He participates selectively, engaging where it aligns with his judgment and withdrawing where it compromises his principles. He is neither anti-system nor captive to it, he navigates with autonomy intact. Because he controls his dependence, he cannot be easily swayed. Bribes, flattery, subtle pressures all fall short. Decisions that would unbalance others barely ripple across him. He acts from clarity rather than compulsion, from principle rather than expectation. His influence is silent but tangible, grounded in sovereignty rather than spectacle. In the end, this is the true silent threat, a man who knows the rules, understands the value of participation, but refuses to surrender himself to them. Calm, measured, and self-directed, he stands outside the usual levers of control, reshaping outcomes simply by existing on his own terms.